You're listening to episode 26 of the D6 podcast.
Here's the encouragement I give you. The shortest distance between your child's heart, your grown child's heart, and Christ is you.
Parents need to own that they are the primary disciplers of their child.
Our goal in parenting is not for our kids ultimately to get a great education, as good as that is. Our goal is not for them to be great athletes. Our goal is not for them to go on great dates and find a great husband or a great wife. Our goal is not for them to have a great career with a great job, making great money. Our goal is for them to love a great God.
You're listening to the D6 podcast. Here's your hosts, Ron Hunter and Jeremy Lee.
This is the podcast that'll help you build an excellent family ministry in your church. You know, I say that every week, number one, because mentally that helps me get my brain started, but that is exactly what we want to do with this podcast. And so thank you for listening. We got another good one for you today. How are you, Mr. Ron? He's got candy across the table. What are those things?
Hot tamales.
Hot tamales.
I've introduced a number of friends to hot tamales. It's called my travel candy. Whenever I travel, I get a box of hot tamales. If you've never had them, just Google it. It's the easiest thing because it's not, a prepared Mexican food. It's a red jelly type candy that's got cinnamon flavored, and you eat one, they're addictive. If you like cinnamon candy, you just one after another. And everybody in the studio is making fun of me because every now and then I'll throw one in and I'll just chew, and everybody catches it through the microphone.
Yeah,
so
we all have headphones.
Oh yeah,
so
no, and
we're experiencing the hot tamales with you.
Ron's eating again over there. So. Anyway, so it's a good way to just pass the time as we're thinking and creatively before we get on the air.
And preparing for
right.
Todd Meadows, who's going to be
Yes.
talking to us today about how to equip parents to disciple at home. Todd is, I would bet not a lot of people know Todd. He's not like some famous dude, but a really cool guy.
He is.
And I think you're the one that kind of helped us discover him, right?
Well, I can't take credit. Dr. Timothy Paul Jones, another friend of D6, Todd is a student of Dr. Jones's.
Gotcha.
And we often look, and I hope Todd's not bothered by this introduction. We often look for a pastor of what we would consider an average church because we often get speakers in from large churches. And the average size church goes, man, I just can't relate to their problems. Like, yeah, how do you corral 200 volunteers? I don't have that problem because I don't have 200 people in our church. And so we look for what we would call rock stars of average size churches who are growing healthy ministries and family ministry. And Todd Meadows is one of those rock stars in a really good way. And I look at them and say, I want to get you in there to speak to like the D6 crowd because it's not going to be long because they're pastoring larger churches because that's the trajectory they're on, and that's where Todd is.
Yeah.
Tremendous guy.
And you could also say normal churches,
Yeah.
real life churches.
Exactly. And people want to hear from these guys.
For sure.
And he's got content.
Oh, man. And you're not too snazzy over there with your guest today.
Well, I called in a friend and I said, Tim Kimmel. I said,
Man.
Yeah, and I was very selfish. Tim and I spent some office time together 2 or 3 years ago when he was working on one of the books that we published for him, Connecting Church and Home, and spent time with he and Darcy. And he told me a story in his office that day that I literally wept listening to. And I just called him and said, our listeners need to hear that story. Now, we'll have a little bit of banter before we get to that story, but he tells a story that just I'm sorry, I'm going to pull out my handkerchief before this is over again today because, I think every parent needs to hear what he's about to say as it relates to grace in parenting when we're holding the righteousness of God, but with the love and grace that God gives to us as his kids.
And he wrote Grace-Based Parenting, right?
He did. He's most known for grace-based parenting, and he's just Googling. Incredible books. He's got several best-selling books out there, but that's what everybody remembers him for is grace-based parenting.
Well, I hope you guys see we got a great show. So after the break, we'll start with Todd, and he's going to talk to us about how in his normal, real-life church, he equips parents to disciple at home because he's an example of someone who is giving grand vision.
Yes.
And so I hope you'll see that. After the break, we'll be with Todd, and then later on, we'll be with Tim Kimmel. It'll be a great show. See you after the break.
What's it like to be a member of the D6 Leader Network? Well, What if I told you that you could hire an intern for your ministry that would plan your sermon series each month and create amazing graphics to help promote it? What if that same intern helped you train your volunteers by writing an online teacher training every month that includes a fully produced video without you even having to touch it? What if that same intern created a fully designed parent resource that they can actually use to help them spiritually lead their family? What if that same intern was able to get you access to every main stage talk, breakout, or interview D6 has ever done at their D6 conference for your own training and development? That would be the best intern in the history of the world, right? Well, becoming a member of the brand new D6 Leader Network is like hiring an intern to do all of that and more for around $1 a day. We make your life easy. We make awesome easy. If you are a minister, you can go to d6leadernetwork.com to learn more.
So my guest today, it's an exciting thing to interview because he is about to release his first book. I'm so excited for him, right. And I think you guys are going to love hearing from him. We're going to be talking about the topic of how to equip parents to disciple their kids at home. One of the things I like about our guest is he's going to get really practical with us, and that's one of my favorite things, and I think it's going to be something you guys are going to be able to take away and give to the parents in your church. But before we get into the content, let me introduce him to you. He's the pastor of students and international missions. That is not a normal combination. I'm curious about that. We'll have to talk more about that. At Grace Baptist Church in Somerset, Kentucky. He and his wife, Stephanie, met in college and was married in 1999. You have 4 children. You just got your Doctor of Ministry and Family Ministry from the Southern Baptist. Did you put the "the" in there on purpose?
It's official, man.
It's like the Ohio State or something.
Right.
Come on
it has
now.
To be there.
These are seminaries. Let's don't. Anyway, the Southern Baptist Theological Seminary. He is currently working to publish his first book, "The King Has Come: Family Devotions on the Life of Christ." You have the word on you is that you are a book junkie. Now, I personally know this because I actually did an online contest where I gave away like 30, 40 books.
That's right.
And like all these thousands of people entered, and you won.
The result of fervent prayer, man.
I'm telling you, what was funny was when I saw my interview list, I was like, are you kidding me? That's the guy who won. I even had to check pictures to make sure it was right. So you love books, I know, because I gave you like 30 or 40 of them.
Right.
So what's the latest book you've read, and tell us what you're learning from it?
The latest one I read was a really good one by a guy named Clint Archer called The Home Team, God's Game Plan for the Family. And you know, our culture is one that's centered around sports, and it kind of appealed to me in that way, is we have so many students and families. I think it's, over 95% of families have some kind of contact with sports, whether that's a child playing or cheering, some kind of contact. They're just centered around sports. And so he goes and he takes and uses a sports analogy for the family and talks about the team huddle and the coach and the role of the father and the role of the mother and you know, even grandparents in there, and really does a great job of giving a biblical foundation the family and how a sports analogy helps us to understand that better. So it's a great resource, really good.
That sounds great. What was the name of that again?
The Home Team.
The Home Team by Clint
Archer. Yep.
Awesome. Clint needs to send you some money or something for that recommendation.
Some press time there. That's right.
All right, so you're a real live minister. You're not just, you're not just playing one on TV. Yeah. You're like the real
flesh and blood, man.
Deal. So that means that you have done some stuff well, and if you're human, you've made some mistakes. So one of my favorite questions to ask somebody like you is, what are you doing really great right now that we could learn from and steal your idea, because, that's just how we roll sometimes.
Right.
And then what's one of the things you did just like really, really, really bad that we just don't want to repeat?
We'll start with the good.
Yeah.
Do the bad and the ugly later.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things that we do really well, I think, at Grace is we have a very strategic plan for educating our children, and the parents just come along and really appreciate that. So we go and we've developed a scope and sequence from birth all the way up through 12th grade, and really focus on giving kids something where they can go out and defend their faith and walk on their college campus with a solid worldview and apologetics and background in theology, and really know what they believe, why they believe it, and how to defend it. And, as we do that, we're putting resources in the parents' hands to come alongside them and to disciple them as in those areas, encouraging them to lead at home with that. And, parents want to know that they're not wasting time in what you're giving them as a family and their students when they come into your ministry. And so that's been something we've seen very fruitful for raising up a generation that love the Lord. We focus in there biblical manhood, biblical womanhood, and bringing in parents to teach those things with the rites of passage and everything as well. So that's been a good success that parents really appreciate. The failures, everything from lock-in or not lock-ins, but capture the flag in the dark that results in broken noses. Fun stories like that every student pastor has. But
every time I ask one of those questions, usually it ends up in some kind of injury with a game. Yeah,
and you live and learn from them. Related to D6, I think one of my greatest failures, honestly, is when I really got a heart for seeing families studying the Word of God at home. I went from they're not doing it to they should be doing it, and here's the ideal situation for how to do it. And so what I put before them was the ideal, where someone should be, and I didn't take in account all the steps in between. So I said, here's, you're in point A, you need to be at point Z, so go to point Z. And, what I found out is that really discouraged parents. I think it backfired. I think a lot of people, when they heard that and the way I presented it, stepped back and went, I can't do a family devotion. I don't know how to do that. I can't just open up the Word and teach a lesson from it and do all these other things. It'd be awkward to sing. What do you want me to lead, singing at home? I can't sing, and I'd put all this stuff before them with good intentions. Certainly had good intentions and not necessarily wrong, but too much for them to do, and it really created a difficult time for parents.
That what you just said should be like written down and handed to every minister as they begin their family ministry, because it's so true. Right. And it's a mistake I've made. It's because what happens is your passion becomes your greatest enemy.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Wow, thank you for that. I hope you heard that. That's transferable to everyone listening in your ministry. That the parents that you're serving, they don't assume they're at Z. Don't even assume they're at S. Right. In fact, just to be honest, go ahead and assume they're at A and be happily surprised if they're not, and help them move past it. Great. That was awesome. I love it. So what do you believe is the hardest obstacle in today's culture that prevents parents from being the biggest spiritual influence in their child's life?
Man, I think without a doubt it's busyness. The parents that we minister to, busyness is something that just gets them constantly. And Psalms tells us to teach us to number our days that we might grow a heart of wisdom in Psalm 90. And Paul writes to make the most of every opportunity. I don't think it's a matter of parents not knowing that we should number our days. They know days are limited, and they know they need to make the most of every opportunity, but busyness leads us to make the most of the wrong opportunities and to number our days for the wrong purposes instead of godly purposes and purposes of discipling our children and raising up a generation that loves the Lord. We number our days to get the most recreation in and to earn the most money, to have the best 401k and just really losing sight of godly, God-honoring, God-glorifying priorities, and allowing busyness just to drive us away from the family and from seeking God's will for the family. And so I think busyness definitely is the greatest challenge for the families we minister to, without a doubt.
Yeah, I think a lot about that. I think a lot about sports. I think a lot about school, and because parents, this is one of the things where I land. I believe parents love their kids.
Oh yeah.
I see parents that I don't see neglect.
Right.
If I see anything, it's probably to the other extreme, right?
They're giving them everything they can.
But it feels like, I want to give them everything I can. And sports and school make it easy.
Right.
Does that make sense?
It winds up hurting the kids. if we don't allow kids to fail, they're not going to learn from failure. If we always give them something when they get in the real world and they fail, how do they deal with that? Am I a failure when they fail spiritually? They're going, I've always succeeded. Everything's been easy. There's times where our faith isn't easy. We struggle through faith, and we have those valleys, and they need to know how to get through that.
Yeah, and if I'm a parent and I want my kid to be a better athlete, I just get him coaching lessons, or I get him a good coach, put him in a great league. Yeah. If I'm a parent and I want my kid to be better at school, I get him tutors, I get him in a great school. Yeah. But if I'm a parent and I want my kid to have a rich soul that longs after God and understands what that means, crickets. What do I do?
Right.
I think that's ultimately, that's the question that's the fear and struggles parents have, and that's the question churches are trying to answer right now.
Sure.
How do we help them do that? I wish it was just as easy as hiring the right coach or getting them in the right school. So so let's talk about that. How do we do that?
Well, we're in a culture that, like you said, is driving us to go to the professional, seek the professional out in every area. And what we've learned from church history and the recent history is that the professional is the youth guy. It's me, Well, the problem is God said, no, the professional is the one that I put at home with the kid. That's the professional. That's the one that I want investing in the kids and discipling them. And so I think, first of all, we've got to remind parents of who they are. They are the primary spiritual leader for their children, and that's their responsibility and their job. And so we've got to champion that and promote that and push that, but then also put parents in a situation where they can win. Give them resources and family devotions, not like the ones I gave to begin with, but ones where they can take and lead it and have some success to gain confidence. Confidence is big for parents. Most of them don't have the confidence to do that, so they want to take them to somewhere else, and they're nervous, they're scared of leading a family devotion.
Here's the issue for a lot of parents. They're trying to lead their kid towards the things of God, but these are the same things they're struggling with themselves.
That's right. Right. Well, and parents need to learn that transparency is not only okay, is good.
Mandatory. You can't do it unless you are, right?
Right. A teenager is going to know. They know if you're faking, right? And so they see right through it. A parent needs to say, hey, I need to look at you and say, I need your forgiveness. I've messed up. We did a teaching actually from parentministry.net on apologies and how to apologize to your children, and it's really helpful for the parents. To sit down and think, how do I apologize? And sometimes that's backing up and saying, I haven't led you spiritually like I should, and that's okay. The kids learn from that, and they need it.
Okay, so family devotions. This is the heart of your book, and right? And so we know that that's a key element to leading kids spiritually at home. Right. Here's my issue with family devotions that I see parents struggle with that I'd love for you to talk through. Most of the time, it's awkward. Right. And you even alluded to that earlier. Sure. Hey, kids, let's all come around and sing Just As I Am. Right. I mean, who's going to do that? So how do we do this in a way that feels real and true and authentic and not contrived and weird and awkward? Yeah. Well, I think one thing that I tell the parents in our ministry is it may be awkward, and awkward's okay. We run from awkwardness sometimes. Sometimes you just need to embrace it and say it's okay to be awkward. And I'm kind of a throw it out there type guy. Just if you feel like it's going to be awkward, tell your kids. Say, I don't know, this is the first time I've ever done this. You're going to have to bear with me. And so that's one thing, is just to acknowledge the awkwardness. I think that's a lot of it. The other thing is we need to place resources in their hands that they can use that helps it not to be awkward. Easy, icebreakers that we've used for years in student ministry. Yeah. Why not incorporate something like that into a family devotion where ask them a simple "Would you rather" question? And you get a family laughing together, then it's going to be fine. But ultimately, I think where the awkwardness leaves is when they learn that leading spiritually is not only leading a family devotion. And I think that's where maybe we miss it sometimes. We put family devotions on such a high pedestal that it's almost like that's the only way you lead spiritually. And when parents learn that, I'm leading spiritually 7 days a week in my attitude and the way I do things, when I apologize for when Johnny saw me sin and confess that and ask his forgiveness, when I'm doing all those things, then when we come together and sit down to just read the Word together,
then it has a completely different feel because they know I'm sincere. They know I'm living it out. It's not just something I'm doing to satisfy Todd. It's something that I'm doing because I care about them. I want to invest in them. I want to see them grow in Christ. And so I think that's big to help parents to see that it's a week-long deal, day in, day out. Live your life for Christ, and that'll help and translate over into a family devotion.
Deuteronomy 6 doesn't say talk about it at a scheduled time, it's as you go, while you walk along the road, as you do, as you move on throughout
and don't
life.
overcomplicate them either. I would throw that in. We tend to overcomplicate family devotions. It can be something very simple, and the more complicated it gets, the more awkward it becomes, I think. So
I love that. And, I just want to repeat so that everybody hears what you said about games and icebreakers and those kind of things. We do utilize those in our age-graded ministries. And if a family probably isn't used to talking about spiritual things together, but one thing they are used to is playing games together. We play family games.
Yeah. Right.
And so that's kind of a cool concept. And it's actually very thought-provoking to me. I hope it is to those that are listening. All right, so let's talk resources for a second. If you had a resource you could recommend to a children or youth minister who's trying to help parents to equip their kid at home, what's a good resource?
I give Timothy Paul Jones a pretty hard time because he wrote a book several years ago called The Family Ministry Field Guide. And, I told him, I said, listen, what's the deal? I said, this is what I needed, 10 years ago when I was bumbling my way through this thing and figuring out, and by God's grace, we did some things right. We did some things wrong too. And, it's a lot of things that we did by trial and error, he was writing about, but it's probably the most practical resource that I know of for a pastor who says, hey, I want to start equipping families and ministering to families. And I need some good foundations, but also some really practical ideas and guidance that I can implement into any context. So it's a great resource. It's my go-to, really.
High praise. I love it.
Yeah, no doubt.
All right. Well, I know of another resource that I want to talk about that I think is going to be awesome. Just because you seem like a great guy, so I'm feeling good about it.
It has to be.
I know nothing other than of this interview, but I'm excited about it now. The King Has Come: Family Devotions on the Life of Christ. Tell us about it. Help us understand why it's going to be a great tool for us.
Here's what makes it unique is there's a plethora of family devotion resources out for children. And, it's not, we talked about awkwardness of family devotions. It's not really that awkward for me to sit down with a 4-year-old and a 5-year-old. They love it. My teenager, that's something a little different. And so when you say, hey, where's a family devotion resource for parents of a teen? There's not many out there. There's a couple, but not a lot. And so with that being so limited, that's the heart of this one, is that it's a family devotion that will hit primarily teenagers. So that's who it's geared towards, but it's got questions in there for younger children as well. But it starts with some of the icebreakers and very practical things. You don't need to gather all the arts and crafts and cookie cutters to do a opening. It's just very basic icebreaker fun, talking questions. Would you rather? What if? Some of the resources that we've used, like we said, youth ministry. Starting with those and then looking at the life of Christ. The other thing I really like about it, and of course I wrote it, so I'm going to like it, but it goes through and just takes the scripture and takes an account of Jesus' life and says, hey, read the scripture, walk through it, and then let's talk about it. We're not pulling things from all over. We want to teach families really healthy ways of studying God's Word and then applying it. Some questions that are very application driven. And then out of that, here's a way that you can apply it. So apply this together as a family over the course of the next week. Here's one thing you can do to apply it. And that ranges from everything from, how you pray together to going out and serving in your community to buying a passport so you're ready to go international when the Lord calls you there. So just really practical, hopefully very biblically centered, and God-glorifying resource for you.
Wow. Well, his name's Todd Meadows. I hope you guys have enjoyed this as much as I have. If you want to follow Todd, he's on the Twitter. You tweet.
That's right.
Todd Meadows 5. I guess the first 4 were taken.
They were. I'm the 5th important Todd Meadows out there
in the whole world. That's not too bad. You're in top 10.
That's top 10.
Hey, thanks for being with us. I appreciate it. I'm excited about your new book.
Great. Thanks, Jeremy.
Are you looking for the right conference to attend this year? The D6 Conference is a family ministry conference designed for your entire ministry team. Come hear from over 30 speakers and network with churches that share your passion for reaching families. Family ministry isn't just another program. It's one of the most important things your church can do to make a difference in your city. At the D6 Conference, you'll be inspired and equipped to take your family ministry to the next level. To learn more about the D6 Conference, just go to d6conference.com.
Well, thank you to Todd. I hope you guys had a great introduction to him. For me, I remember when I did the interview just being genuinely impressed with him. And so thank you for your time, Todd. Thank you for serving the folks on the show today. He did that interview a while back. He didn't even know he was going to be serving people today, but he is, and he did. And so thank you, Todd. And speaking of serving, it's time to hear that story you were telling us about earlier.
That's right. You know, when I think about Tim Kimmel, I do think of grace-based parenting. And, you know, I'm thankful most of all that I was introduced to Tim before my kids were finished with their teenage years, because I needed to learn lessons from Tim, how to administer or how to offer grace to my kids the same way our Heavenly Father offers grace to me. It doesn't mean we compromise our expectations, and that's what I want our listeners to hear from the heart of Tim as he speaks today. Is it's not a compromise on standards, but it's an administer of grace, so the connection is so real that we can attract our kids back to Christ.
Yep, let's listen to Tim.
We are privileged to be sitting with Tim Kimmel. This is without a doubt one of the most insightful gentlemen, and I say that about a lot of people because we don't interview anybody who's not insightful, but there are people who shape your life, and Tim has personally shaped my life. He shaped my parenting role. He has shaped how I think about my kids. He's the president of Family Matters. He has written numerous books, best-selling books. He's best known for being the grace-based parenting guy. And that is the heart in which I want us to talk today. Tim, I visited your office and I sat in your conference room with Darcy, your wife, and we were talking one day, and you were talking about the way parents parent improperly, but not with bad intentions. Let's kind of walk through that and just kind of help us as parents, because, by the way, we as ministry leaders get it wrong at times. Just give us some encouragement, please.
Yeah, I think everybody's well-intended, but many times misguided. And sometimes it's the conventional wisdom that has actually prompted them to go the directions. Because I think as you look at evangelicalism over the past 30, 40, 50 years, it has been preaching a parenting plan that I would call performance-based parenting. And of course, legalism is a kissing cousin to this. And this is where it's an outside-in plan for getting the kids to look a certain way, act a certain way, and talk a certain way, hang out with these kind of friends. And if they do that, then they're nice Christian kids. And then, of course, if we get the right biblical information into them, well, there you go. But you see, God wants this to be launched from a relational foundation, an inside-out thing. And then I think also there's a lot of fear in the typical parent today. They're highly intimidated by it, and they feel outgunned and overwhelmed by the world around them. And so I see fear-based parenting also coming into play, and it's a standard thing, but it's pervasive. And what gets me, Ron, is when I see this so overwhelming the standard Christian parent, because I'm thinking if we're followers of Jesus, we should be the last people afraid of just about anything. And so as my wife and I were on our journey at parenting, we realized that the missing ingredient in most marriages and in most family relationships is not love, it's grace. I mean, they have tons of love, no doubt about how much they love each other, but grace is the missing element. When I'm talking about grace here, I'm not just talking about being nice to each other, because nice and grace are not synonyms. Grace can be nice, but they're not synonyms. I'm talking about something that launches straight directly from our heart relationship with Jesus. And when we have that heart connection to God that goes beyond just the grace of salvation, that we take that grace he saved us with and now let it wash over us and start to define us and become the defining feature of our relationships. That's Jesus showing up. And if someone said, what is the job of a parent today? And it's not, food, clothing, shelter, health, education, and welfare. That goes without saying. You have to do that for your pets too. But the role of a Christian parent is to connect to the heart of their child in such a way that it makes it easier for that child to connect to the heart of God. And I think what is required of that is to have families that are guided by God's truth, but tempered by his grace. And see, grace is a game changer, because this is what our hearts are designed to respond to. And when grace overwhelms the relationship, the dynamic between parent and child, and husband and wife, and even in discipline, then it's amazing when you have to do tough things with your kids. Grace comes to the rescue.
So Tim, talk us through what's an example of fear-based parenting. Just one or two short, and then my follow-up question. You and I talked about this before getting on the air, where I want to go with something you and I talked about in the past. But give us an example of fear-based parenting.
Yeah, I'm scared of the internet and hip hop music and public schools and cohabitating neighbors and all this stuff. So I figure the way I do this is I raise my kids in a much more cloistered environment. I control all the stuff around them and so forth. I protect. The problem is, the sin problem is already on board the kid. And on top of that, we're not supposed to be raising a bunch of safe kids. We're supposed to be raising a bunch of strong kids. And we don't realize the power that God can do in our home when we let him be the source of our confidence and not be defined by the fears around us. That doesn't mean there isn't clear and present danger out there, but we don't let them define the way.
And you're not advocating going out there to any of those areas. You're just saying we don't have to protect them from it. It's what we're hearing here.
Look,
Now,
it's like this. I say, okay, we wanted to raise our kids in the world in such a way that no matter how wicked and bad the world is, not only could they survive, but they would actually thrive spiritually. In other words, it would actually make them, draw them closer to Jesus. And the key is the family, the home, because when the home is a safe harbor and it represents the totality of God's heart, his truth and his grace, then we can equip them to go out there. And by the way, this is all done incrementally. You protect the younger kids more, but you want to get them to be able to
be salt and light, just like you said, going out into the world. So,
and you want to prepare them to be able to walk on their own 2 feet with the Lord.
Now, last time you and I were together in your office, you shared a story with me that just blew me away. And I'm hesitant to ask you to share it again because I'm fearful my reaction is going to be the same it was before. But I want people to hear the story of the pastor in your church and how they dealt with grace-based parenting approach with their daughter. And you know what I'm talking about there, yes. Tim. Can you tell that story? I know I'm asking a lot, but...
No, that's okay, Ron. They're wonderful people, and we knew them from the time their first child was born. We watched them raise their kids, and they clearly raised them with the heart of Jesus leading the way. And they were clearly a grace-filled home. Clearly, the truth of God was taught. The boundaries were there, but they were filled with God's grace. Well, they had 4 children, and their kids all came to Christ. They were leaders in young life, and they were just great kids. But the one girl graduated from college, and she went out on her own. And they always come, and they would, anytime the kid would move, and they'd come and set things up for them and help them move, right? Well, she was living in another state, and she said, "Mom and Dad, I'm moving." And they said, "Well, great, we'll be there to help." Well, I just need you to know I'm moving in with my boyfriend. Now, they had taught her that so well. I mean, she had led girls in young life about sexual purity and all, but she had fallen in love with this guy, and she had let her emotions lead away. She fell in love, and they decided to move in together. Well, they talked about it. They didn't. She knew the truth, but she was headstrong. They said, "Well, we're going to come out and help you move." "Oh, you don't need to do that." "But that's what we do. We'll come out." "No, you don't need to do that." "No, we'll be there." And so they showed up, and they went in and helped this couple move into their apartment. Now, this couple knew full well that they had not compromised their convictions at all, that their hearts were breaking when they realized the choice that these kids were making, but they still loved them. And remember, God says he causes his sun to shine on the just and the unjust. He causes his rain to fall on the on Justin Andrews. Why did Jesus say that in the Sermon on the Mount? Because he said God knows we need some basic things, and they needed the basic care of her parents. So they came and they helped everything. Well, the last thing before they were leave was the bed. And the father set up the bed. Well, it needed to be made. And the mother said to the daughter, come on, honey, let's go in here and we'll make your bed. Well, this is the symbol of the sin that they have chosen. And the mother was not encouraging. She just saying, yeah, my job is to help you move and to care for you all the way through. And so they went in, and the daughter did not want to do it. Said, no, honey, you get on that side. And they made the bed. And this poor girl, this girl knew full well that she was just tearing her parents' hearts up. But she was stubborn, and she was into it. And they made that bed, that symbol of this stubborn pride, because they also knew she also has to sleep at night. They have to sleep. And so they went and left. And they just went into their car. They cried, and then they prayed the whole way back to Arizona. And they prayed and prayed and prayed. And they prayed for about 1.5 years, 2 years. And then God's Spirit cracked through that girl's stubborn heart. Her boyfriend came to know Christ. He realized he was doing wrong. She repented of her sin. They ended up absolutely, getting married. To tell you their story now, this girl leads young life. She leads your girls in young life, and she tells them full out, let me tell you why this is such a bad mistake. I know it by experience. And she said, but the thing that got me is I saw my mother and dad continue to love me through my shame, through my sin, through my rebellion. They didn't stop loving me. They never compromised their convictions. They never backed down on what they believed, but they didn't stand in condemnation on me. They just said, we're going to love you. And God has done a wonderful thing in them. It's hard to do, buddy.
That's impressive, Tim.
You can only do it with the power of God's grace.
Yeah. I think that's a challenge. That's a symbol of the prodigal son. It's the way the father loved his son. Never said what he did was right, but was constantly loving the way our Heavenly Father loves us. Thank you for sharing that, Tim. This has been a powerful moment. So appreciate you. Okay, I think the challenge before us are we looking at our kids on a performance level? Are we looking at them as a parent, where we parent them the right way? I don't want to have a performance-based program for my kids. And I think after hearing from Tim Kimmel, none of us do in here. And we want to offer that grace. Did that story not get you, where they're literally making up the bed of that daughter who's going to move into the boyfriend she's not married to? Just hearing that heart of those parents going through those motions to love on that daughter and continue the testimony of what God does to reach them back for Christ. Wow.
That's shareable.
Yeah,
that's shareable. Hopefully that is shareable. If you know someone that's in a similar scenario, or that'll touch, hopefully you'll share that with them, because that was awesome.
Yeah.
Our thanks to our guest today. Thank you, Ron, with you and your hot tamales for being with us today. And we are so just honored every time you guys take the time to listen to this. I say it every week because it means so much to Ron and I. We say it genuinely. We know there's so many options of things that you can listen to out there, and if you made a choice to listen to us, we're going to say thank you. On behalf of Matthew, our producer, behind the screen over there, just rocking it on his end, thank y'all for being here. We'll see you next week. And speaking of next week, we've got a man with a wonderful name. Dan Lavaglia is who I will be interviewing. We'll be talking with him about the secrets to leading a great small group, which I think everybody listening can relate to. And who will you have?
Chad Overton from Houston's First.
Chad Overton. I love him. Okay, well, thank you guys for being with us. We'll see you next week. If you want to write us on Twitter, you can use that hashtag D6Podcast. We'll be looking at that every week. You can email us. You can call us. You can call Randall House and just randomly say, I want to talk to Ron, and see what happens. You might get him. Who knows? And y'all can just chat. Thank y'all for having a great I meant to say have a great day, and thank you for being with us. So why don't I just say that? We'll see you next Tuesday when our next show drops.
You've been listening to the D6 Podcast. You can learn more about D6 at d6family.com. And if you're a minister, we invite you to join the D6 Leader Network by going to d6leadernetwork.com.